world is changing fast. New technologies are impacting how we think about products, services, and the way we live our lives. Nowhere is this trend more present than in financial services, where new business models and customer expectations are changing our conceptions about banking, finance, and the very nature of money. Welcome to Rebank, a visionary podcast about banking, fintech, and the future. The future of banking is here. Hello and welcome to Rebank. I'm your host, Will Beeson. Today we're joined by not one, but four guests, building and funding artificial intelligence companies. Scott Sage is a partner at Crane, a venture capital fund focused on complex enterprise software, much of which incorporates AI. Abhirekt Sapru is the chief revenue officer of Tessian, an AI-powered email security company. Tim Pullen is the founder and CEO of ThoughtRiver, a legal tech company offloading contract work to artificial intelligence. And Ed Chalice is the CEO and co-founder of Reinfer, a company leveraging artificial intelligence to extract sentiment and insights from vast quantities of corporate information, including email. I was clearly out of my depth in a room full of PhDs and advanced computer scientists, but wow, what a fascinating topic. We cover everything from funding and growing enterprise software businesses to where in society artificial intelligence is likely to have the greatest impact. As always, connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or on our website at bankingthefuture.com. If you like today's show, please subscribe on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice and leave us a review. Thank you very much for joining us today. Please welcome Scott Sage, Abhirekt Sapru, Tim Pullen, and Ed Chalice. Scott, Abhirekt, Tim, and Ed, welcome to Rebank.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Well, this is excellent. We've got a larger group tonight, which I think will make it interesting. And I think importantly, you guys all come from the same, broadly speaking, space, the enterprise software space. I think we've got, as we try to do on Rebank, we have one foot kind of in the fintech space, but we have I think other areas, other industries, other segments, other topics to explore as well, from law to data science to other things. So Scott, you're the nexus of this session tonight. You're a venture capitalist, a partner at Crane, and an investor in all three of the companies we have with us tonight. So tell us a bit about your fund, your thesis, and how you connected with these guys.
Sure. So we set up Crane a couple of years ago when we noticed kind of a couple of themes emerging in London specifically. The first was that the first round that you're raising, before Series A, if you're building an enterprise product like these three gentlemen in the room tonight have been doing, it's the hardest round to raise. Investors want to see metrics. They want to see proof points on how the product is working. And especially if you're investing into more deep enterprise companies like, again, these three companies tonight, they want to see what's your data strategy, what's your acquisition for the next tranche of growth. Where is this going to come from? And the other theme we were noticing was all the smartest founders were moving into kind of enterprise AI, enterprise data. We call it intelligent software. And so I think VCs tend to follow where the smartest founders go. And actually, I remember meeting Ed several years ago when we were just getting our fund up and running, and he was pitching us the kind of original incarnation of Reinfer, and we got really excited by that. So for us, we look at really fundamental things around how proprietary is the software that they've built, how unique is the data that they've captured to date, and then how good are the outcomes that they're predicting or prescribing. And we just closed a £60 million fund investing all across Europe into these enterprise data companies, typically 500K to £3 million. And we really are working with founders on getting to 100K plus of MRR and getting the right team in place. Monthly recurring revenue. Thank you. Getting the right team in place and laying the foundations to enable them to grow beyond just the UK and Europe. Typically, that means going to the US at some stage. So that's Crane.
Excellent. Well, I think we've had one of your portfolio companies on the podcast before, Hussein Kasayev on Fido.
On Fido.
Excellent story. And I think along the same lines. Actually, I think one of the questions I asked Hussein, kind of the topic of conversation we got into in the founder sessions interview that I did with him, was around effectively this point, which I think we'll get into more tonight, which is basically, how do you kind of fund the first iteration of a complex, enterprise grade product? And thinking back to his answer, feels a bit unfair. I think his co-founder had basically just finished doing his PhD at Oxford in exactly what they were looking to do. So, certainly a good way to get started, but potentially a leg up over the average founding team.
I don't want to bore you automatically, but that's exactly, all three of these guys tonight have almost a dominant, I would say, banking. All three had previous experience doing something around what they're doing now, and that's kind of how they came up with the problem that they needed to solve. So that's kind of an interesting theme we can explore.
All right, so Abhirekt, Chief Revenue Officer at Tessian. Tell us a bit about Tessian.
Sure. So Tessian is a machine intelligent email security platform that uses our sort of proprietary technology to analyze relationships over email to prevent information from being sent to the wrong place, or to prevent sort of inbound threats like spear phishing over email. Now, to kind of talk a little bit about the genesis of the risk, as it were, enterprises are generally made up of, or are made up of people, and people propose sort of, or are the biggest unsolved problem in security to date. And I, as an example, I was a banker previously, and at banks we would see deals collapse, we would see lots of regulation and lots of policies emerge internally because people fat-fingered emails and sent across entire pipelines to the wrong person. And it still remains, when people are spending so much money on security products on sort of scary buzzwords, there's still sort of this human risk still exists in the market.
And so what stage are you guys at? And I don't know, at what kind of phase of development would you say the product is?
Sure. So we raised a Series A earlier this year. We raised about $13 million US dollars. And we're currently in a really interesting position as a business, opening our office in the United States and really trying to double down and continue on the growth rate we've achieved so far.
So UK company, where in the US are you opening the office?
In New York.
All right. Can you name any of your clients?
Sure. So some of our clients include sort of Clifford Chance in the legal sector, a Magic Circle firm. We work with a range of financial services companies as well. Most of those firms like to keep their names private in security, and work with sort of other companies in the healthcare sector and pharmaceuticals as well.
Great. Tim Pullen, a CEO of Thought River. Tell us about what you guys do.
Yeah, thanks, Will. So Thought River is an AI platform which reads contracts automatically. And we read it in a certain context, which is helping lawyers make an early decision about what they do with a given contract, which is coming into typically their legal department in a large corporation. The reason why that is key is that most large corporates are swimming with contracts, and we know that just from research that lawyers are spending up to 40% of their time just dealing with these mundane issues. In this case, what do I do with this contract? Do I read it? Do I give it to someone else? We just ignore it? How bad is it from a kind of risk perspective? Just that kind of initial decision-making process can take up to 40% of a lawyer's time in a large corporate. So what we do is our system reads that contract automatically, and using AI, it makes a risk-based recommendation about what they should do with it in order to speed up that review process and actually speed up business generally.
Excellent. So you guys are, of course, augmenting lawyers and helping them better do their jobs, not
That's a good word.
Replacing them.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, what I would say, when we started, and we probably like most of the people here, we started many years ago with a problem, as Scott's mentioned, which is fundamentally you don't know whether you need to read a contract without reading it. and that's the dilemma that we are addressing. But when we looked at that problem, what we did was we looked at actually what you do today, or what you would do if you wanted what our system does, which is pre-screening. And pre-screening in a manual context involves giving the contract and a checklist to a junior kind of paralegal and asking them to then sort of review the contract, answer the checklist, and tell you how risky it is. And so we modeled our entire system around that process, because reality is most expensive lawyers in large corporates don't have the headcount for a junior body sitting next to them. So we are trying to be, that kind of little helper on the shoulder that's helping them get rid of the mundane stuff so they can focus on the more valuable stuff. And it's useful for the corporate, obviously, get more value out of the people, but it's also really valuable for the person, the lawyer involved, because the last thing they want to do after kind of 20 years of practice is read, an NDA. But the reality is that's what they need to do today.
Well, it sounds like a powerful product and well positioned too. Dr. Ed Chalice, giggles.
Sorry, yeah.
CEO and co-founder of Reinfer. Tell us about Reinfer.
Great, yes. So Reinfer is a machine learning platform which makes unstructured communications data, so that's email conversations, telephone calls, chat conversations, turns that unstructured communications data into structured data to drive action. So in the front office, that would be typically deployed against sales conversations or conversations with relationship managers. And we are interpreting those conversations to build out a profile of the market and generate kind of market signals and for customer intelligence. So the bank or the brokerage or whatever can act in a more kind of holistic way and better engage their customers. And then in the post-trade space, it's about understanding the organization's operational flows. So what work are we doing? Why are we doing that work? How could we rationalize that work and improve our processes, but also trigger automated processes. So automate the delivery, the fulfillment of certain requests in email or chat.
Wow. So we could easily have, I think, one-on-one conversations with each of you guys, but the topic that felt most interesting to get into was really, effectively to simplify, how do you build a complex enterprise software business, specifically a VC funded one, which seeks to sell to tier one blue chip companies. I'd be interested in Birk, maybe we can start with you. Tell us a story. How did you guys close your first tier one customer?
Well, it's a really interesting question, and it also kind of comes down to how you define tier one. So the way I would look at it is at every junction you close your first tier one customer, because it is the most important customer that you close. And I wasn't around with the company when the first 5 deals were on board. It was sort of 3 founders, kind of basically trying to find initial product market fit, building the wrong product, getting feedback, kind of iterating on that and finding something that kind of stuck. Mm-hmm. When I kind of got involved, we had clients who had bought with different mindsets and had different values or different outcomes expected from the product. They all wanted to solve the same risk, but they didn't know how prevalent the risk was. There was no stats. There were no ways we could actually demonstrate value. It was all kind of trust-based selling, and customers needed to kind of take a leap of faith almost, really, initially, that the team was right and the problem was big enough that it was worth investing in an untried solution. Yeah. What ended up happening next was we kind of understood what the results looked like and what a successful customer could be. And then as we kind of moved along that journey, we were able to say, these are the outcomes that you can expect by using our product. And we can build a process and build a methodology to allow you to see those outcomes as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. In terms of pricing that initial deal, is that, as you said, the customer's taking a leap of faith? Are you still offering your fully fledged pricing, or are you offering a 50% discount and we'll set it for we'll give it a 3-month trial period if it hits your kind of the agreed objectives, then we'll extend it to a year, 2 years, 3, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to discount initially. You need to do whatever you can to win business. For us, if you think about the cost of acquiring a logo, it's the logo is much more important as the outcome versus the actual revenue number up front.
A recognizable customer.
Exactly. But once you have a few of those on board, you can start seeing what people are paying for other products, and if the other products were perfect, then your product wouldn't exist, which means that you can justify charging a premium pricing. There's a problem that's unsolved, and they haven't been, despite spending all this money on a range of products, they haven't been able to solve it. So you can come in above what market rate looks like and set pricing accordingly.
Does anyone else have an answer to that question? Can you
on pricing or how you get
yeah, the first one, and specifically any stories about your own experience, what that process looked like?
Yeah, well, sorry, doctor.
Yeah, it's big one of there. Okay, okay. So I think one thing that works to your advantage in that very first customer is you're quite well aligned in a sense, right? So we are looking to build, truthfully the best solution, and the customer is looking for the best solution as well. So actually, in those very early days when you're building something new in this kind of enterprise space, there is this really strong alignment between the two intents. Now, customers will ask for kind of things that look like consultancy or like bespoke kind of solutions, and you always have to be thinking about, is this something that's bespoke? Is this something that are we creeping in to just become kind of advisors? But I think that's a doable thing. But you are actually closely aligned in terms of really solving the problem, and that can be quite refreshing to them if they're talking to these much more established big vendors, where their interface with those companies is via people that might not care so much about the integrity of that.
So Ed, for you guys, what did that process look like? The raising money, which presumably you needed to build the product, getting the product to a point where it could be sold to an enterprise because it actually solved a problem. And kind of converting that first customer. How much building took place before the initial sale? Was it a fully fledged product, or was it something that still needed significant development?
So we are actually a spin out from the AI research group at UCL. So a lot of the core kind of a lot of it comes out of that research. Now, so the code we wrote from day one once we started the business, but we weren't coming to this cold. We had we've done loads of research in the lab, and we'd all worked, building machine learning systems in prod. So we'd learned a lot of lessons kind of the hard way. But that being said, just something that works from a kind of machine learning feasibility point of view, does it have all the kind of characteristics of something that would work, is still very far from something that can actually work at the scale of a large bank. So we were lucky, and I don't know if it's lucky, but we had this unintended consequence of our first customers were in e-commerce, and those guys are quicker to move and understand. I think they just by their DNA, an e-commerce business is inherently closer to a startup in their whole mindset, and so we built a good product for those guys, and then we moved into this capital market space, and there were periods of time that were quite sleepless in the development of a truly scalable solution. So, they will have hundreds of millions of email conversations per year. So that was a huge re-architecturing of our kind of back end to support that volume. And then we had to build out many other things which are, incredibly boring, but requirements that are needed for this stuff to be built, so like programmatic user access controls and two-factor authentication and all this wrapping that a product has to have for it to be a real solution. But you can do that stuff once people see like this is a valuable thing.
That's actually a really interesting point. I ended up judging an open banking hackathon over the weekend, and the winning team had built this perfectly functional little MVP, effectively, which kind of supported a kind of a payment delegation component during a checkout flow. So you imagine that, I don't know, business traveler is logging onto Expedia to buy some flights in a hotel, and that company doesn't operate a corporate card model, and so the payment needs to come from an approved payer. That individual can effectively, once Expedia's integrated this little MVP, kind of push a link to the payer within the corporation, who can, via open banking authentication, access the portal and pay by the company's bank account and take care of that transaction effectively in kind of a push notification, quite instant, quite automatic flow. All the reconciliation, of course, is incorporated and everything else. In 48 hours, they built that using the open banking APIs, and of course, immediate questions. What about two-factor authentication? What about SMS security? What about this and that and the other thing? And it's okay. In order to actually productize this, of course, for enterprise use, we would need to spend 6 to 9 to 12 months building those wrappers that you're talking about, and really enriching this for use. So I think one of the points that we might kind of pull out of this evening's conversation, effectively, the difference in resilience architecture from a consumer proposition to an enterprise proposition. Tim, back to that question from before. I'd be interested in I don't know, in your experience.
I think our experience is a bit different in that we started right at the very beginning with a problem and a kind of vision and a PowerPoint deck which described how we were going to solve that vision, and really we've stayed on that point ever since. And the process of finding the first customer was just finding other people who had the same vision, but they weren't going to build it, they wanted to buy it. And I think that because it was quite specific to legal domain, but not any particular sector. We have clients in financial services, in advertising, in engineering, and industrials. It was just a question of finding those collaborators, and they really were collaborators at the time. I mean, they had this vision. We never did really anything for free from the very beginning. It was like, even though this is beta, it's value, and we put a lot of value in there, and we wanted to make that very clear. But at the same time, it is beta, and we're very clear about this. But we just found the right type of collaborators, and we are not a small company solution. We're not yet, not for quite a while. We're always becoming.
It's expensive.
Yes. But no, in that, the problem we're solving is one which only really large companies have, which is way too many contracts and budgets to actually deal with that issue, particularly financial services companies, because their product is essentially a contract. And so, all the risks and liabilities and opportunities of their business are enshrined in these documents they can't read very quickly. So we found those collaborators and worked with them, and that was the way. And fortunately, they had the right vision, same vision as us. So, actually, when it came to them pricing what we were doing, it became quite a simple task of just saying, well, what are you not doing as a result of this product achieving its potential, and that therefore set the price. And for most of these guys, the general counsel of large corporations, they're used to buying legal services but nothing much else. They're not used to buying software or anything like that, so you had to keep it quite simple for them in order to make it fit within their budgets. So that's really how we've done it. I mean, to the resilience point and building that first product, the first product was embarrassingly rough, really. But the point was that we involved our first customers in that journey, so they understood where we were. And I think you sometimes have to have the guts to do that. in order to get the traction to really understand whether what you're doing is on the right course. Since then, of course, we've built industrial level infrastructure to handle this. I mean, machine learning. I mean, on any contract, we're making hundreds of thousands of predictions. That's really, really complex, and it's very computationally intensive. And it can, if you write it badly, even just part of it will blow up. And it has blown up, at times, on our journey. So getting that bit right is absolutely essential. I just think for us, probably for the others in this room, Abs and Ed, it's this timing thing. We started doing this at a time when we were creating a new category. There's nothing called pre-screening. When we started doing this, automatic contract pre-screening just didn't exist. So you're creating that new category. You can find the collaborators. I guess if we'd started now, it would have been more difficult, definitely.
There's people who looked like they were about to step up and comment on one of the points that
I just think the difficulty of building an enterprise product is, a machine intelligence enterprise product is not the enterprise stuff. it's the if you've got machine learning in your product, that's the stuff that's going to be the most challenging to get right.
Yeah, and I also think machine learning companies are at a disadvantage today because they've been sold what has been machine learning by people who have not done machine learning in the past. So naturally, a buyer has become very skeptical about what machine learning actually is. So when you actually show them a product which works that is machine learning, they're kind of blown away. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic that's created.
Actually, to that point, I'd be interested to hear from you guys. So I was at an event this morning with a fintech chatbot company. So it's basically kind of helps you extract some insights from your spending habits, helps you save more, gives you some advice. And I think they certainly leverage AI and machine learning in their product. And I think they, like many other quote unquote AI companies, they're not writing their own algorithms. They're leveraging a lot of open source algorithms developed often by PhDs like our friend Ed over here. In your companies, to what extent is it leveraging kind of existing frameworks, and to what extent is it genuinely kind of cutting new ground and developing new AI technology?
I would say it's a combination. You'd be crazy to redo what Stanford has done for the last 40 years in natural language processing. But in each case, I imagine with the people here, we're taking some of the prior art and we're creating the new art by applying it vertically. And even if you start, we have certainly written our own algorithms, but even if you start with something which is really sort of cool out there, someone else has done a lot of research on, you can't just plug it in. To actually make that work in the context of your domain, your application is a lot of development time, a lot of R&D time just to see how it responds to different scenarios, configuring it. So really, you starting maybe with something that you wouldn't want to develop from scratch, but you're putting a lot of work on top of that to make it really work.
Others are nodding.
I'd agree with that, but I think if there's something that does the job and is open source, then you should use it. That just makes sense. But I just because you said the Stanford NLP thing, so actually for our stuff, the thing is with kind of conversational data is it's not real sentences typically. It's completely different from a legal contract, right? That
you don't know the drafting we see.
Who are your customers again? The context is assumed. There's custom custom terminology. The whole thing is a mess, right? And the Stanford NLP parser would just completely break down on most of the sentences that you see in a conversation between colleagues, right? Or in a conversation on a front office kind of sales desk. And then I also think there's a kind of more institutional problem with machine learning research, which is machine learning researchers are really interested in the art of the possible or just on what's on the edge of what's possible. But often what's possible requires almost infinite training data, which makes it okay for Google and okay for Facebook, but really not okay when you're deployed inside an enterprise business and there is no labeled data. So it's a bit of a kind of technical point, but like the training data is not there for many enterprise machine learning problems. And so you're in this low training data regime, and so anything from like the big machine learning, like Microsoft, IBM, Google, all of that stuff is built for this kind of internet scale data, so it doesn't really work.
Scott, from your standpoint, I'd be interested to know, we kind of talked about, basically like how you seed an enterprise software company. And, I think we had various experiences here. I think Tim's example is, kind of classic startup, right? Like got this deck, like raise some seed funding and start building. From the enterprise software investor standpoint, maybe you can extrapolate out to, guys that are doing, later stage rounds. What are they expecting to see in terms of progress, in terms of product maturity at each stage?
It's really interesting. So at seed, where we invest, we are looking for a couple of things outside of the foundation. So good team, potentially large market, hard to tell when they're defining a new category. And again, back to team, but how technical is the team? And so at that stage, assuming they tick most of those boxes, ability to raise the next funding round, et cetera, we're looking at, can they develop or finish refining the product to a point where they can go from a handful of POC customers or proof of value customers to a point where they have 3 or up to 10 paying customers. Because at that stage, I think you have enough data coming through the product, the algorithm, to get a sense of whether or not you're actually changing something fundamental for the enterprise. And at that stage, for us, that's a huge tick for let's go and raise the next round, because at that stage we can show, and it's not that important that this is machine learning driven or they're building on top of data within the enterprise. It's more they've found this niche into the enterprise where they're solving such a massive problem that we know it with $5, $6, $10 million of investment, we can double down on initial sales and marketing efforts and go and take the market. And so at our stage, it's about how do you take something that's good enough, as in accurate enough with the data that you've been running through the system. And I think if the next logical stage is Series A, so Tessian obviously, they can't be telling, if I send, hey Tim at Thought River, hey Tim, here's the latest set of legal documents between Crane and Thought River, and I accidentally send that to Tim at Tessian, who's also named Tim, that would be a data breach, and we would have to report that to the Information Commissioner's Office, and I'd get in trouble, and my head of regulation would be like, naughty Scott. So if Tessian was unable to pick that up, a very basic, email blunder between seed and Series A, there'd obviously be something wrong with the product. So what we're looking for is companies who can, with a very high degree of accuracy, do what they're telling the enterprise they can do. That's kind of like step one. That's, okay, go raise.
And how do you check that out?
We go and talk to customers. That's the easiest way. I was a statistician in a previous life. Unfortunately, I only got to MATLAB. I was never, an R or Python geek. Definitely not machine learning. Can do a multiple regression. But so we go and speak with customers, and that's why we love when we invest for there to be kind of 3 people we can go and speak with, even if they're not paying for it yet. They're using it in an enterprise setting, so we can see how it's transforming something internally. So I think customers want to see the accuracy, the speed, and whatever it is each of them are kind of trying to predict for the enterprise. That's just step one. Everything else beyond that, telling a story in terms of an ROI, perceived ROI, that's where you move from, and maybe this is pre-Series A, maybe it's post-Series A, moving from early innovative buyers who share the same vision to actually the more skeptical buyer, yes, we save you X% of time every week, or we stop 99.97% of emails that shouldn't go out. We stop those. And at that stage, you have to move into a world where you have real hard ROI data, not just the anecdotal. We have 5 customers, and here are the early statistics from those. And that's, I think, the most difficult thing for any data-led company, is moving into having that kind of hard ROI.
Yeah, we now spend a lot of our R&D actually benchmarking what we do, because you have to absolutely have those stats. Otherwise, early on people can do the trust sell, as you say, but they need the stats. And for any machine learning company, benchmarking what you do is fundamental.
And most of the late stage buyers will sort of, as you cross that chasm into the next rung of buyers, they want to see evidence. They're much more kind of logical, but they also want to see what their peers are doing. And I think case studies, we have customers who are willing to go out and put their names to videos and come on our website and tell the world that they love the product. And I think that's been really essential for our growth as well.
Yeah, great point. Maybe I guess we can kind of shift gears slightly and think more broadly about kind of AI and its role reshaping the enterprise. We heard a bit from Tim before about how the kind of lower tier entry level, I guess, paralegals in that case might be well, I suppose, for lack of a better word, replaced by good software. I think
they'll just be doing better stuff. Oh,
there you go. Fair enough.
I was a lawyer. I trained as a lawyer. When I was a lawyer, young, they got me paginating bundles, right? Literally stamping. I'd spent 3 years in degree, done 2 years law school, and now I was sitting there paginating bundles. You don't have to do that anymore. And my point is that actually, as we keep moving up the value chain, you keep finding ways to actually make people's working lives more interesting. And that's for the paralegals as well as the more senior lawyers.
Yeah. Birk and Ed, I'd be interested in thoughts of yours around the impact that AI is likely to have on enterprises more broadly.
I mean, that's a big question. I think it's too simplistic to say that it won't kill certain jobs. I think there are all of these statistics around what the proportion of people involved in agricultural industry, or what proportion of the populace was involved in agriculture before mechanization, right? And that proportion is much, much less today. So there are just much fewer farmers. That is a smaller profession, and to be a farmer now is to be a kind of a coordinator of technology. So I do think that I think the other thing to say is this isn't just about AI. This is about software in general. So even say AI didn't exist, just well-written software and the internet. I mean, how that is going to just completely, that still hasn't really taken effect yet. And that the implications of that, to our economy are really profound. And then what machine learning's doing is kind of layering on top of that, ridiculous infrastructure, is this ability for machines to perceive things that are more in the kind of human realm. So, without AI, IT system like the internet is just this kind of system where humans have to key it in, and then again they get some data back, and that's the kind of, it's still like a terminal in a way, even though you can key in some data here and then you can
key it in with your voice.
Yeah, exactly. But the machine learning is giving you that keying it in with the voice, right? So before any AI, it's like people are data entry. People are the mediation between the machine and the action. And machine learning is changing that, I think, equation such that it's not just people that mediate between data and the machine, or between the machine and its ability to take action.
Yeah, and for me, this is I was recently in Italy and doing a little bit of history as a result. But from what I've seen, every generation has gone through some sort of commodity boom and then an industrial revolution of sorts. And I think our generation's commodity right now is data or information, and the kind of revolution that has to kind of come with that commodity is usage of that data. And the most efficient and probably most scalable way of using that data is machine learning. You're seeing it everywhere. It's not just AI companies. Every company is becoming a technology company. Look at Goldman Sachs as an example. They're basically changing their business or pivoting their business from being a full service bank to how do we use technology and become the bank of the future. And if everyone's now applying AI companies just naturally have a leg up to kind of go out and kind of take market share.
I'd be interested in your guys' view, maybe very, very quickly. So there's this concept of, or this kind of like, rhetorical question, like, is this like technological shift, if it's a new industrial revolution, to use your term, or something else, is this technological shift just another in a long line of technological shifts that will have an impact on labor market, which humans' kind of traditional ways of operating will recover from? Or is this something fundamentally different where humans never work again, and it's the kind of kicking off a downward spiral in the kind of the extinction of humanity?
So I'm less pessimistic about that. I think it's a natural. People can disagree with me here if they do. That's kind of strongly, but I think it's just a natural step on a ladder. And we are a human society where no one here wants to replace everyone, and this sort of Terminator-esque mentality of AI and robots taking over the world, I don't think is necessarily realistic. I'm sure when people were putting coal into or building steam engines, they had a similar view about the horse carriage. And you think about Henry Ford saying, if I asked people, if I gave people what they want, I'd give them bigger and stronger horses. I think these are just natural shifts that are going to just change the way humanity interacts with each other, interacts with the information that's presented with them, and allow us to make better decisions and more informed decisions going forward. Yeah.
I would definitely agree with that. I think what AI enables technology to do is just fit itself better to the human context. And we've now got used to this, but you remember the internet back in the day, back in the early 2000s, there were so many things which were quite jarring and about a kind of internet website experience. But now you just get used to the idea that it is going to make a useful suggestion. And I just think that all three of us are playing that out into more sophisticated vertical domains. But you've got to remember what the fundamentals of AI are. And machine learning, as smart, as clever as it is actually, there's some way removed from kind of a robot that's actually got self-determination, that can conceptualize in the way in which we do as human beings. So and will software ever get to that point? I don't know. I know it's very clever today, but there's a yawning gap between that and a robot lawyer, for example.
Ed, I know you have a more dystopian view.
I mean, so again, I think
and he's a doctor. I mean,
I don't think something has to be clever for it to be kind of impactful. So again, I think machine learning and AI are going to have a tremendous impact, but the distinction between, I also just think that software is tremendously impactful, and I think the biggest risk I see is not a Terminator, execution event or some weird thing like that, but just that all of the assumptions of our society and our kind of welfare system and our tax system, I think, work on this kind of core assumption, which is hours worked is approximately correlated to value created. And that kind of correlation is just eroding more and more and more. And it started to erode with the Industrial Revolution, where, you could cleverly assemble a sequence of cogs and a steam engine, and you could just make more cloths than ever, or whatever it was. And it's just, that is just happening more and more. So, a company with 15, 20, 100 employees could make an insane amount of value, and what does that mean for the tax system? What does that mean for the welfare system? What does that, that all of those implications, I fear that we won't move fast enough I believe we can fix all of those problems, and we will, and it's kind of an inevitable change, and it's a good change, because actually I don't like having to triple check all of my email recipients and just live in fear that I'm constantly sending it to the wrong person. I don't like reading NDAs. I hate reading NDAs. So
we'll talk afterwards.
So I mean, I literally hate those tasks, and why should anyone have to do them? But society needs to get its act in order. As a kind of as a country, a civilization.
My theory, I mean, I agree with it. I don't think you disagreed. I think I agree with a lot. You just said it very eloquently. I agree with a lot of that. What I would say is, a lot of things that, if you really think about them, are obvious but haven't yet sort of become obvious in society. I'd say that AI is one of those things where, it will change the way people work. But parallel could be drawn with the .com. Back .com, I remember thinking, wow, this is going to put shops out of business, and it didn't really happen for quite a while, but now it is actually having that effect, and it's almost inevitable. So I think that AI will take a while to play out in that way, but it will definitely change the way people work. But I don't think it's the Terminator, not in our lifetimes anyway.
Scott, I wanted to leave the last word to you, perhaps generalizing even more and thinking about from where you sit as an investor, specifically around I think intelligent software, to use your word. Where do you see kind of most opportunity, scope for most kind of further work in intelligent software?
I hate to tell you, but I could never predict. I never thought we would do a legal AI company. Tessian was our second security investment. We weren't actively out looking for our next security deal, and we're kind of just a first principles investor. We think about it like a talent agency, setting it up so that we have all the components around. You guys are going from 5 million to 20 million next year. Where can we help with augmenting that with some outside support? Can we help you with a recruiter, etc. So for us, we're kind of different from most funds where they have a mountain of associates, and they're going out and they're calling every single company that ever makes it into TechCrunch or Crunchbase or CB Insights, etc. And I got the intro to Tim at Thought River from one of the founders of Tessian. I got the intro to Ed from a good friend at Seed Camp. So it's kind of funny now. We've built a little portfolio of 17 companies, and almost all of the founders have been introduced from someone really close to our network who are like, hey, you guys are doing those crazy data enterprise companies, it's so boring, and I don't know anyone else who will fund this, but you guys seem to get passionate about it. So, I never thought that we would do a dry bulk shipping investment. I didn't even know dry bulk shipping was a thing until we backed, Jenna and Fabian's company, Shipomax. I didn't know anything about ID verification until I met the founders of Onfido. So we have a holistic kind of thesis and a lens from which we kind of look up and size markets, and we have an approach to kind of analyze all these companies and benchmark them to all their peers in the public markets, private markets. We find experts, etc. So we try and just keep the very thematic approach and then keep it really basic, because I'm by far the lowest IQ guy in the room. And if I can't figure out what you guys do, then I don't know how you're going to sell it into an enterprise customer who just has one problem that they need you to solve. So that's a really boring answer to your question.
Yeah, well, an honest one. And I think my takeaways following this conversation, everything we've heard,
we're going to get you to angel invest into more of these.
Absolutely.
Awesome. We need more investors in Europe in this space.
And also that your pipeline is at no risk of drying up. I think there's a massive
Unless
opportunity.
Unless we piss off all of our founders who say don't take Crane's money, then yeah. No. So far.
All right. So to wrap up, where can people connect with you guys and find out more about your companies?
It's reinfer.io, and you can get our contact details there.
Yeah, Tim.
So thoughtriver.com and any kind of legal IT mag as well.
Abirect.
Tessian.com is the best place to go, or an email to contact@tessian.com.
All right, Scott.
Please email me, scott@crane.vc. Enterprise data deals. We're open for business. Would love to talk to you.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning into Rebank. If you like today's show, reach out. Follow us on Twitter @Rebank Podcast and join the conversation. For more on banking, fintech, and the future, check out our regular content at www.bankingthefuture.com.